Hello and welcome to lecture 14, where I'll be talking about quad lights. They're also known as rectangle lights or area lights. So in the basic sense, this is what they look like. It's like a box and you can use them to create really nice soft fall-offs. Quad lights are used in studio lighting environments, so it's very common to use quad lights. And with Arnold, it's very easy to use and very efficient. So from now on, you should only be using quad lights. So let's dive into the settings of that specific light. So at first, let's just create the light Arnold Lights Area Light. And on default, it's on the origin. So let's just move it up, scale it up a bit and see what we get. So currently that's the size of the light. I tried to make it more realistic. So this would be now, I'm scaling up to 30 units, so 30 centimeters for this quad light. I'm rotating it down and you can see the direction of the light is indicated by this line right there. And currently on the left is my active render and you see there is not much happening. And on default, the exposure is set to very low. So in real world, let's just boost this up maybe to 12 units. And you can already see now on the left, you can actually see something being rendered here. And the more I boost it, the more you see. And I also have some volume scattering enabled just to visualize the light fall off and actually the shape of the light. So if I would rotate this towards camera, you can see what it looks like. It's rectangular and you can see the pattern right there. And obviously you can see how it's affecting your scene based on the lighting. So the first thing is I would want to talk about normalize. It's a bit far down in the settings. You can find the normalize option below the samples on the left, on the right here, but it's a very important aspect. So if normalize is on, it behaves interestingly and very realistic in my understanding. When it's on, it means the light intensity will not change based on the scale, which is not always physically correct, or sometimes it's just a different way of setting up lights. So as you can see, if I scale the light up, the overall intensity does not change, but it gets very soft. And you can see at the bottom, the shadow softness gets really soft because I have a big surface of the light. You can see the smaller I make it, the sharper the lights, the shadows at the bottom. You can see now you get a really sharp outline. And obviously the light is more focused, so it's brighter in the center, but you can see overall it's the same intensity. So let's say as I change it, disable normalize, it will get really bright now just because my exposure is really high. So if I bring up the exposure to maybe a value of 5, and if I scale the light up, now you can see it gets really bright the bigger I scale the light. Sometimes it's helpful to do this. It depends on your needs, but it's something to keep in mind that if normalize is off, the light intensity changes based on the scale of the light. And obviously it ties also into the shadows. So this is more physically correct, but it's a lot easier to work with normalize on because you can just set your exposure to a value which you like, let's say maybe 15 for this case, and I can just scale my light up and down and keep the same intensity, but I am now able to easily control the softness of the lights. So this is the main parameter I want to talk about because it's very important to set things up. And then you have more settings to control the shape of the rectangular light. So the default parameters is it's kind of spreading almost 180 degrees. You can see that if I boost exposure, it's actually almost 180 degrees emitting light. And you can change that by adjusting the spread. So on one, it's full 9 or 180 degrees, but the lower I make this, the more angled the light gets. And you can see in the render, it gets more and more like a cone, which is an interesting or sometimes even a desired effect. So you would play it down. Just keep in mind, the lower you make this, the stronger your light gets, and it introduces a bit more noise because it's harder to sample. But this is kind of like a searchlight now, and you can see how nice it works, how it gets closer, and it's more like a spotlight or a searchlight. You can rotate it and you can see the beam of light. It's a very cool effect. That's very an important thing. So if you want to control your emission of the light, you can play around with this. Default is on 1 though, which is the best optimized sampling. And then you have other options as well. So you have resolution. This is mainly interesting if you plug in textures. It's just a representation for multi-important sampling. I won't be talking about this because I think this is a bit too advanced for this course. Also, you have roundness, and if I boost up the light and actually bring it into camera view, I just want to demonstrate what it actually does. So if I copy this tab quickly, just to be able to deselect it and control the lights still, you can see now if I boost up the exposure, you can see the light a bit better. And if I now change my roundness, you should see that the shape of the light gets more like a disc. And if it's fully worn, it's circular, like a disc. You can also change the type here to disc, so this would kind of be the same effect. You can also play around with a soft edge, which gives you a fall off from the light towards the center. So the higher play this up, the softer the fall off you get. You can see it gets a bit more noisy. So let's just bring the roundness back to 1, so it's more rectangular. And you can see now it's more a soft light. Back on 1, it's really nice and sharp. And soft edge introduces a softer fall off. It's more like a soft box now, which is very cool. Then obviously you have the default settings to not cast shadows, shadow density, shadow color, and you can also disable disable cast of volume shadows, which would be happening if I would play it in the back here. And if I rotated this a bit down, you should be able to see, maybe you can see there's a slight shadow going on right there. So if I disable this, you don't get the shadowing effect, and you can see that's actually happening. And again, you can also play around with the visibility of each ray type. You can disable diffuse, you can disable specs. So you can really break physicality with these controls. Okay, let's just position this guy back on over the top just to get something more interesting here. Bring it back up. This would be the introduction for a typical quad light. So all the parameters are self-explanatory. Samples is something, if you have noise here in the shadows, you would boost up the samples, but would not go higher than 3 because they are tied into your render settings. But this is all I wanted to talk about for the quad light.